Hey everyone, welcome to BevNet and NOSH is virtually live. I am Justin Kindle, the editor of Brewbound. If you're looking for a discussion on hard kombucha, then you're in the right place. We brought together 4 leaders in this fast-growing space to discuss what it's like to build brands in a segment during a pandemic. We'll discuss their trends over the last 3 months, the outlook for the segment in the future, and much more. Joining us today are Bill Moses, founder and CEO of Flying Embers and Ventura. Thanks for joining us, Bill.
Great, nice to be here.
Greg Serrao, co-founder and CEO of JuneShine in San Diego, is also here. Thanks for joining us, Greg.
Thanks for hosting, Justin.
We also have Bridget Connolly, the co-founder and CEO of Luna Bay in Chicago. Thank you for being here, Bridget.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, we have Todd Kent, the CEO of Boochcraft in Chula Vista. Thank you for being here, Todd.
Yep, thanks for having us.
I can't thank you. I already thanked you guys, but I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. We've asked a lot from you, and we're going to ask a lot more. We've got a lot of folks who are tuning in, and if you have questions, add them to the Q&A below and we'll get those answered. So let's go. Last year, off-premise sales for the hard kombucha segment totaled around $12 million. Halfway through 2020, the segment has already surpassed that figure and is closing in on $20 million. That's an increase of about 63% year over year, according to Nielsen. Each of your businesses are contributing a lot to that growth. As we sit here on June 24, I'd like each of you to very briefly set the stage for how your 2020 has gone thus far and how those plans may have changed due to the pandemic. I'll start with Greg.
Thanks, Justin. I think us, like most alcohol companies that have a combination of taproom business or own premise, as well as a significant wholesale business, we're impacted just like everybody else. We lost the on-premise business to our wholesale and our own premise business almost overnight, and we had to make some pretty quick decisions. I think for us, the key focus was we're a growing company, and we made a commitment to a number of folks to join our organization and leave more established, safe organizations. So finding a way that everyone could continue to contribute and grow the business was pretty much our first priority, and that's worked to our advantage thus far. But I'm not sure if I have anything much more unique than the rest of the businesses that have been affected negatively by this.
Right on. Bill, set the stage for Flying Embers 2020 and how your plans may have changed.
Yeah, sure. So, we were planning on spending a good part of our marketing budget in experiential, everything from partnerships with different musical venues like the Hollywood Bowl or various venues up in the Bay Area, et cetera, Brooklyn Bowl up in New York. And, all that came to an abrupt end. So we had to shift pretty quickly those marketing dollars from experiential, music-based venues to digital. And getting our feet early on, getting our footing early on digital, really understanding, who the target is and, what keywords and messages really resonates with them has been a real learning. And so we're in the midst of that. And then finally, I think we really pulled back on feet on the street. Where we actually resource up across the country has really gone under a much more rigorous critical eye so that we could really see if there's an ROI, given the fact that there's still some constraints, more so in different parts of the country, of people getting into store on and off premise. So that's it for us.
Todd, Boochcraft is the market leader at the moment in the segment. Lay out your 2020 plans and how those might have changed.
Yeah, so for us, we had spent the last 6 months underway with a really big rebrand, a new brand identity, and we were also changing format from 4-pack to 6-pack, adding 16 ounce among a few other things. Those are all supposed to happen in concert and land April, May. And with the shelter in place order that got handed down in mid-March, that all came to a bit of a halt. So the integrators for our packaging equipment were on site the day that the shelter in place order got handed down, so they had to leave. So a lot of pivots. We also had 2 tap rooms that we were planning on open that one got delayed and one got punted.
Bridget, your company is one of the youngest among these competitors. Tell us how your plans for growth may have changed in 2020.
Yeah, so I mean, really this time last year, we weren't even producing yet. So we were about 3 months into distribution at the start of 2020. So we were just kind of getting our feet wet, just kind of getting into on-prem. So it really just drastically shifted all of our business to focus on off-prem. And in addition, we had in mind a couple markets this year that we were considering, and it really just shifted our growth trajectory. We were able to find the right partners that understood our brand, understood hard kombucha, and are able to represent us in the communities that they're in. So it helped us to grow, but it's been definitely, we've had, like, you know, Todd said, we've had to pivot quite a bit, but the focus really shifting from on-prem to off-prem, and then in addition to adding more markets than we had originally anticipated.
This isn't a one-size-fits-all segment, and each of your products are pretty unique to the other. So I'd like you to briefly sort of break down each of your, I guess, those differences. So I'll start with Bill. Can you share the ways that Flying Embers differs from your competitors here? Bill.
Sorry, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so we really got ahead and really focused on fermenting all the way dry, leaving no residual sugar, and that enabled us to not have to pasteurize and still have a live bacteria culture in the drink, and yet not have and enable us to go shelf stable. So we're able to floor stack and maintaining sort of the core values to what we believe is important to be an authentic kombucha, which is you don't pasteurize, you have a live kombucha culture in there, bacteria lives, and that you can actually take our beverage or any others and restart a new kombucha with it if you add some sugar and some tea to it. So as it relates to us, I think our difference is shelf stability without compromise to without pasteurization and compromise to having live kombucha culture in the finished product.
Todd, share the ways that Boochcraft differs from your competitors here.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an entrant into the better for you category, brands, it's a non-negotiable for brands to be, certified organic, have some sort of give back, whether it be 1% for the planet or otherwise. Things like transparency and marketing, those feel like non-negotiables. For us, the biggest differentiator is that we bring in whole fruit. So our flagship brand is the grapefruit hibiscus. We bring in 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of grapefruits, and we, as whole fruit, we fresh press those in-house, and that's how we get to all of our flavor components. So unlike Flying Embers, we're unable to be shelf stable. So we really put a lot of focus on cold chain. But yeah, I mean, we think that the whole fruit juice is probably the biggest differentiator between us and any of the other brands.
Greg, break down the differentiators for JuneShine for us.
Yeah, for us, I think it's flavor profile and brand. So we use green tea and honey as our tea-based and fermentable, and it produces a different flavor profile. So like what Todd's talking about is pretty badass, and I think it yields for an awesome product, and I enjoy Boochcraft. But like if you take a Boochcraft or any of the hard kombuchas compared to something, if it's made with black tea and sugar compared to something that's made with green tea and honey, it's just a different flavor profile. I'd say like a little lighter, a little more sessionable. That and brand. Yep.
Bridget, share the differentiators for Luna Bay.
Yeah, I think to Greg's point, some like the building the brand is really important and telling our brand story. in addition to the flavor profile. So I mean, for Luna Bay, we are a female founded and female team. It wasn't intended to just be a female team, but we are a small female run and female team, as well as we have a yerba mate tea as our base. So it's just, you know, my business partner is a holistic health coach. And when we were originally playing around with flavors, the yerba mate tea just really came through. It's really strong. It's very different. So I would say that the yerba mate tea and our brand story.
One thing Bill mentioned was authenticity. And as you're growing a product in this segment, this burgeoning category, and you're trying to expand and scale it, how do you maintain that authenticity of product? And I guess I'll start with Bill, since you brought it up.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm jumping around here, but you know, I think really what's most important is for us is that we have instituted quality assurance and GMPs, so that as we scale, our good manufacturing practices aren't compromised. That's the first thing and most important thing. We're not afraid to discard batches if they don't meet our specifications. And, you know, I think the other thing I think that's important about authenticity is that you maintain your core value proposition, you live by it. And for us, it's just making sure that we never find ourselves in a place we're like other non-alc kombucha brands have had to pasteurize that we never pasteurize. So that's sort of what drives us.
Greg, when we talk about authenticity, what does that mean to JuneShine?
Yeah, I think for us, it's a little bit bigger than a product or necessarily hard kombucha. I mean, the thesis for us coming into the alcohol industry, you know, we have no prior experience at all. We still don't really know what we were doing. We didn't know what the fuck we were doing when we started, you know, 25-year-old. And the entire idea was make a transparent, sustainable product. And so for us, it's a little bit different than necessarily trying to adhere to kombucha as much as it is trying to build a product in a brand that adheres to the 4 core values that we put into place, which are sustainability, transparency, quality, and people first. And just always going back to the purpose, like we make honest alcohol for a healthier planet. Are we doing that? If we are, good. Is that resonating throughout our entire organization? Good. If it's not, we're having some serious problems.
When we talk about authenticity for Boochcraft, break it down for us, Todd.
I mean, I think for us, it's that we're committed to doing the right thing, especially when it's difficult. So, I mean, we started this as a small company. We had about 1,000 barrels of annual capacity, and we were at that time. It was really easy to hand juice everything because the capacity was so small. And we were visited by one of the large beer executives from the innovation team, and we were juicing limes that day. And the guy was like, "What are you doing over there?" And we explained, like, we're juicing limes, flavor the apple lime jasmine. He's like, "Wow, that's crazy. That'll never scale." And I think that was the moment for me, which I realized that we had to scale it, because it's the thing that other people won't do because of the convenience factor. And it's just operationally probably the most challenging thing that we've done. So, I mean, our annual capacity is currently around 100,000 barrels. We're not selling that, but that's what we can have the opportunity to make. So scaling up that juicing operation has been very difficult, resource intensive, and it's just the commitment that we have. Yeah.
Shoving it in people's faces and proving them wrong is a strong motivator. Bridget, tell us about that, maintaining that while building Luna Bay.
Yeah, so I broke up for a second, but I think, similar question. But yeah, I think for us, it kind of goes back to building connection and community bigger than just the product. So we did start in these 2 20-barrel tanks, and to be able to scale and keep that same type of product as we've scaled into much larger tanks has been something that is non-negotiable for us, with the non-GMO ingredients and our quality metrics, and dumping batches if it doesn't hit the quality metrics that we're aiming towards. And then, yeah, in every market we go into, it's like, is the distributor a right fit? Building the connections and relationships with them, building the relationships with our accounts, having brand ambassadors. I mean, and most every market we're in, I have a family member, a cousin, a friend. Like, everyone is so related and connected to us, working for us. And so I feel like you can really feel the authenticity in the relationships that we're building, both at the account level, the distributor level, and even within our own team. So I think that comes through when we sell our product.
This is very much fertile ground that you guys are on, and you're building brands. You're also building a segment that maybe eventually becomes a category. What are the obstacles that are currently standing in the way of doing both, building your brands and building this segment? And I'll start with Todd.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us specifically, it's cold chain and getting distributor buy-in for that, because that's something that they're not used to. It's a bit of an operational challenge for our distributors. And then also consumer education. So, I mean, we had heavily invested in our demo program. And so, you know, it's one-to-one marketing. It's tasting people on the product, and that, you know, having that disappear overnight is really been challenging for us in an effort. Like, we have had to pivot and build up core competencies in other forms of marketing that we weren't focusing on prior.
When you're building this, the obstacles are, it seems like they're too much to overcome almost at the moment, with COVID-19 being such a factor, but and the loss of sampling, like you pointed out, that's a major hit. Bill, when we talk about these obstacles and the, you know, the educational hurdle that exists at the moment, how do you overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole, you know, the distributor network is really challenged in understanding kombucha when they're traditionally selling beer. So we do, you know, with regard to them, we do a lot of consumer education, giving them really simple, dummy-done explanations about how to pronounce kombucha, what it is, its origins, what the analog is, how it's similar to beer, and as it relates to its how you make it. So for us, it's just a lot of communication with the most important piece of this this chain, which is our distributors. And what I realized in alcohol versus non-alc is the distributors have so much more power and control over, you know, your destiny, that getting them educated, aligned, and bought in requires a lot of communication and simple communication. So.
Greg, what are the greatest obstacles you're seeing as far as building this segment, building your brand?
I think it's a good old-fashioned obstacle of time. There's a degree of time that's necessary for a new brand category to grow. You know, sometimes people say, like, the faster something grows, the faster it falls off. And so real categories that are built to stay and built to last, generally they can grow quickly from a consumer's perspective, but I think in the background, you know, there's actually been years of work from all the early entrants to build up that category. And I think that's something that we're facing right now, which is it's clearly working in the markets that we have been in as a collective group for a period of time. And that same time dedication needs to be given to the new markets that we all respectively plan to enter in the coming years.
Bridget, Luna Bay is based out of Chicago. 52% of hard kombucha sales are in California. So I imagine geography is one of the challenges that you're facing in building your brand. Can you discuss that and the others that you might be facing?
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, to your point with the samplings, it's been, I mean, when we entered into the market last fall, it was no one really knew much about kombucha, let alone hard kombucha. So we were definitely faced challenges there, but the sampling programs that we have instituted at most of our off-prem and on-prem locations have been extremely helpful. So that, and then even, yeah, Wisconsin, we just launched in. So that's been another one, trying to do samplings or dry samplings, and how do we get more education out there. We've just had to continually pivot and figure out what to do. And every market is different. So how do we get creative in each market that we're in? So we're constantly having meetings with our distributors, our accounts, our team to shift accordingly in each market. And then obviously when we launched in California, the shelter in place started. So, you know, coming into a market with some of the, you know, the biggest competition there is, and not really, you know, going back to that relationship aspect, like not being able to build relationships, having to maintain 6 feet distance, wearing a mask, like it's proven a lot of difficulties there, but to be able to work around that and still build those relationships in different ways has It's taught us a lot. We're just seeing in different markets, there's a different strategy.
Well, and that's something you've opened up a lot of new markets recently. You're in New England, you're in the Massachusetts area, Rhode Island. You opened Wisconsin recently. So doing this during a pandemic, when shelf resets have already been sort of scuttled in a lot of ways, how difficult is it to sort of expand that distribution and gain that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think again, I'm really grateful for the team that we have in place and the relationships and the foundations that we've been building for months. So this has gone into the, 2019 of really building those relationships with the regional buyers for, Whole Foods, Fresh Time, Binny's, all these big accounts that once we've been able to launch into new places, a lot of those relationships are connected. So, Wisconsin, Illinois have very similar buyers. The East Coast is connected to some of the buyers in the Midwest. So some of those relationships already being in place. And then also the distributors that we've been having conversations with for a long time. They have great relationships and they're out there educating the consumers on the product as well. So it's been strategic. These conversations have been in place for a while. And as we've seen the growth of hard kombucha, our distributors are even more excited to get the product into consumers' hands. Oop, I think you're on mute, Justin.
I mentioned that half of the dollar sales are wrapped up right now in California. What's it going to take to build outside? What's it going to take to get, a consumer in Des Moines, Iowa buying hard kombucha? And I'll start with Greg.
Thanks, Justin. This is a great question. I think it ties into what Bridget's talking about, because I do think there's a little bit of a stigma of, is hard kombucha just a California play? I hear that question. And, and I think that, let's take Chicago, for example. Chicago, from a non-alc kombucha perspective, is a top 5 market. And I was talking to our wholesaler there, Lakeshore. They're awesome. And I was kind of giving them hell because they didn't even know that. Like, I don't think that a lot of people in Chicago drink kombucha. And I was like, no, it's actually a top 5 non-alc kombucha market. And so I think in terms of scaling things out of California, one of the reasons that this stat you mentioned, which we know to be true and well, the reason for that is that's where the largest players in the category have started and are home-based. And I think it's just a matter of them spreading out elsewhere and other entrepreneurs like Bridget. But if you think about it like this, so Boochcraft and JuneShine together make up 2/3 of the sales in California, and the next closest player has 10% share. So if once Boochcraft and JuneShine and other market entrants start to scale across the country, I think that outweighted percentage of California starts to go down over the next couple of years.
What's it going to take to build this category outside of California for Flying Embers?
Yeah, I think more competition. I think the more of us that get in market, I think when we see Todd expand and as Greg continues to expand nationwide and Bridget, when we all get on shelf, more communication, more marketing dollars, more awareness, more trial. I think the rising tide will lift all ships, as they say, and I think that's what's going to be super value. So that's what I think we need to do. More of us that get more footprint is going to grow the marketplace.
Todd, do you agree? Is that what it's going to take to build outside of the state of California?
Yeah, I would echo what Bill says, that rising tide floats all boats, and that with entrants like Strange Beast from Sierra Nevada, here you have a national brand that has a lot of reach and a lot of pull with distributors to really start to elevate the category and educate not only the consumers but also the distribution network. Because to Bill's previous point, the distributors in this industry really hold the key to the success for suppliers, and cultivating strong partnerships and relationships with distributors, and to be quite frank, choosing the right distributors is a huge part of it. Greg,
Todd mentioned other players joining this burgeoning segment. Sierra Nevada was going to get in and is still getting in, but they were going to have a draft play. Boston Beer Company tried with Trura a few years ago. Do you see this as a positive for the category overall? What are the potential pitfalls that we might be seeing?
Yeah, Sierra Nevada coming in was kind of a when idols become rivals situation. I think that personally, and I know in our organization, we have a ton of respect for the Grossmans, and Ken was actually nice enough to actually we do like a monthly speaker series and bring in other entrepreneurs that have specialized in sustainability, and he came in and spoke with us. And I think that him and myself, and I echo what Todd and Bill said. I mean, there's a point of diminishing return, but we're far from it. And I think that more competitors will breed a bigger category. And we do need a couple large players to come in, because I think it legitimizes it in markets where we haven't had the time to get to yet. Retailers that aren't, in the epicenter of the West Coast or New York City. And over time, it just breeds familiarity, which is, I think, one of the biggest pieces of creating a new category.
Bridget, do you see this as an opportunity to help build the segment up, or are there concerns that larger players might take away from some of the existing participants?
No, I agree with Greg's point, and to just everyone on this panel. I think for Luna Bay to be in the same space as JuneShine, Boochcraft, Flying Embers, I think they're very well known and respected brands. So for us to go out and, to pitch to accounts and speak to who else is out there doing hard kombucha and their success is a great win for us. You guys have paved the way for someone like us to, also join the space. And I truly think everyone has their niche. Like, everyone has a type of, beer that they prefer, a type of bar that they prefer. There's RX bar, there's, True Valley, nature bar. Like, for us, we want, we are a yerba mate, female founded Luna Bay hard kombucha. And I think we all have a different space in the game.
Bill, are you excited to go gloves up with Sierra Nevada?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's what it's all about, right? I mean, great competition brings the best out of us. So Sierra Nevada's got a great brand name, and they're going to be putting out a lot of great marketing messages and dollars. So, I think, like I said, the more the better, and it's going to really cause all of us to up our game.
When we talk about growing this segment, it's hard not to think about hard seltzer, which has positioned it, or been positioned by many, as sort of a better for you item, which I don't believe that many here might agree that it has the functional benefits that your products offer. But we've seen hard seltzer grow into a 10 share of the beer category, at least in the last couple of weeks, and there's confidence that that's going to continue. If hard kombucha is a healthier option that follows its non-alc counterpart, how big can this segment grow to be? And I'll stick with Bill.
That was the one question that I scratched my head. I don't know if growth of our category is directly related to just health benefits. I think when you see what Todd is doing and what Greg's doing as it relates to brand, and Bridget, brand is really important. So there's also this flavor, this organoleptic flavor profile. So, kombucha is more craft and less FMB oriented as it relates to, the hard seltzers. So I'm not really sure what's going to drive more share other than just a greater drinking experience. And whether or not that's going to dictate or translate into a specific share, I don't have any visibility on right now.
Todd, what are your thoughts on this? Is there, how big can this category grow to be, or this burgeoning segment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we exist inside of the better for you category, which sky's the limit as far as, better for you products. But the way that we like to quantify that, or best guess it around here, is that if you look at hard seltzer at $1 billion, it's a subcategory, or if you look at the seltzer space, the non-alcoholic seltzer space at about $4 billion, and then quantify out that, 25% of those sales can, equate to hard seltzer. If you did the same math with kombucha, I think that in the US, kombucha sales are in the neighborhood of 500 million. So, I mean, it could be easily, for us, we could easily think that this category is 150 to $200 million in a handful of years.
Greg, where do you see the trajectory of this segment going?
Oh man, I don't have a crystal ball. I think that, it's going to be somewhere between the size of cider and seltzer is the way I like to think about it. And I think that seltzer is a very relevant and necessary stepping stone to getting the consumer to drinking what I would call like a more functional alcohol, like a hard kombucha. And it's like, I kind of equate it to, I have a big family. I'm much older than my younger siblings. When I was a kid, my mom would give me like cinnamon toast crunch, right? And Fruit Loops and Lucky Charms. And then 5 years later, it was like, no, it's gotta be granola with whole milk. And then like another 5 years later, my little sister's eating like granola, like muesli and blueberries and almond milk. And so I think that it's partly just the transformation of knowledge of the consumer, which again, takes time. But I think one thing Todd pointed out, which is if you chart the growth of a non-alcohol product that clearly drove an alcohol product's growth, which is the non-alc seltzer to seltzer, there's a very similar path at a slightly smaller scale that's happening right now with the non-alc kombucha growth, which I know Bill knows a bit better than I, and then now with the hard kombucha growth. So we'll see.
Bridget, what's your level of confidence in how big this category can grow to be, this versioning segment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already seen a significant amount of growth in a really short amount of time. And we're seeing from our consumers that there is a huge demand for it. And I think that, I mean, it's like a subset of almost like the hard seltzer space. I think there's a lot to be learned from the hard seltzer space. I think that, I mean, even then it was like they're creating these marketing plans and these, creating these consumer awareness and, Truly and White Claw. And I think like people, even the canned aspect of it, like people have really been gravitating towards canned drinks and better for you drinks. And so they kind of started to pave the way for some of the trends that we're seeing now and we're incorporating into what we're doing right now. So I think their success has been helpful for us, even when we pair it. Sometimes we pair it next to each other on shelf space by hard seltzers, and people gravitate towards the hard kombucha because there's even additional benefits as opposed to just going with a seltzer spiked water. So I think there's definitely some perks to being in the same type of category as hard seltzer. And I think that hard kombucha is just starting.
Greg, you mentioned the top heavy nature of this segment. I asked Nielsen and they said that the top 5 hard kombucha brands make up 83% of the dollar sales, at least over the last 52 weeks. And that's pretty well held steady over the last 4 as well. We've seen sort of a similar trend play out in the hard seltzer space while we're talking about that, I guess, with Truly and White Claw being the market leaders and Anheuser-Busch's various hard seltzer brands coming up third. How many players can there be in this space? How many can be sort of at the top, which seems to be still up for grabs? And I'll ask Greg that question to start with.
Thanks, Justin. I think if you asked that question to someone who's starting a craft beer company 15 years ago, they never would have predicted the number of craft beer companies that ended up launching in the time thereafter. From our perspective, I think there's room for a lot of entrants. Alcohol is a lot different than non-alcohol products, and there's room for hyper local to regional to national, different price points. So we think there's room for a lot of players. We look forward to seeing that. That being said, I do think there will be an 80-20 rule, with 20% of the participants making up 80% of the revenue, not just today, but for the years to come.
Todd, how do you see the competitive set playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Greg. I think it'll probably fall like a 80-20 rule, but I still think there's a lot of room for new entrants to the point that Bridget made. This is a category in its infancy currently. So there's a lot of opportunity. And I personally have a belief that there's always room for excellent. So someone who comes in with excellent branding, excellent liquid, whatever their niche is there's always going to be an opportunity.
Bill, you're in that Furious Five. Do you see it staying a top-heavy category?
You know, I actually have a little different take. I think it's gonna be a lot of regional players, a lot of micro kombucha companies. I think that, like craft beer, there may be the New Belgiums or the Firestone Walkers, et cetera, that make a national play and have a big mark. But ultimately, I think this ends up getting fragmented, and I think there's going to be a lot of local players that are going to really stay local and regional and really build out, you know, sort of be the girth of the category long term. So,
Bridget, we've mentioned that you've moved into so many different markets. Do you see it as a regional game, or do you see it as national players?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a national players to it. And I think that, I mean, we've seen in new markets, being first to market has obviously been really helpful to gain that consumer awareness and to build those relationships. And, but I mean, it's definitely been more challenging entering into California and seeing how many, you know, incredible brands are out there. So I do think there is definitely a local aspect to it. People really rally behind the local, and how do we be a local in connection to each market we go into. But I think that there's space for definitely more entrants in the market and to grow the category.
We got a couple of questions in from the audience here, and one of them is, how do you think about trade-offs with macronutrient breakdown and taste for kombucha? Throw it out to the panel. Who wants to take it?
Come on, Bill.
look, you know, look, it could be a race to the bottom on macronutrients. I mean, it's important, right? But I mean, great brands have great flavor and great flavor profiles. So while, you know, macros are important, you got to have the liquid in the bottle that really appeals to people.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? I'll take that as a no. The other question we got through is, how do you think about fermented juices? Can you talk about pulp culture brand that as an emerging new alcohol?
I think that it's, again, it kind of goes back to there's something for everyone. I've tried a lot of the different types. I've tried that one as well. And it comes down to your flavor profile, what you're interested in. I still think that's different than hard kombucha. You know, the live cultures, the tea, the way we brew, the standard of identity, you know, being, you know, following that process with the Kombucha Brewers International. And I think it's a different category. There'll always be things popping up, new seltzers, but I think that, yeah, there's something for everyone. And I don't think it impacts our hard kombucha space.
I'd like to circle back to talking about the effects of COVID-19. I'd like to get you guys' take on what the implications of an economic downturn could potentially do to this segment. So I guess I'll start with Greg. How do you see this sort of playing out?
Yeah, thank you, Justin. I think that this is a super important question, especially if there's any wholesalers or retailers listening in. I think when you look at where we're at right now, we have a health problem in the U.S., right? Pandemic, and then we have the potential to see a long-term lasting economic downturn. I'm not an economist, but it's viable. And so when you look at that, what are we going to put on the shelves and what are we going to sell to consumers? I think first and foremost, people are more cognizant of their health than they've ever been. So from a personal health perspective. And then from an economic health perspective, a lot of folks think that alcohol is completely recession-proof, but that's not necessarily true. Certain alcohols are and certain alcohols are not. When we look at the last recession, the venues that we saw that were recession-proof are the ones where hard kombucha does best, and the consumers with which hard kombucha does best, which are natural grocers. So those companies are fairly recession-proof. And so that consumer in that venue, or that consumer shopping in any other large chain, could be Target, could be Kroger, they're likely to continue purchasing items the same way they were prior. And I think a lot of those folks are hard kombucha consumers. That's my take, but I'm curious to hear what the rest of the folks think.
Todd, do you feel like hard kombucha is going to be recession resilient?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'd echo what Greg said. I mean, I think that there's been a large movement in the country towards better for you, not just in alcohol, or I guess newly in alcohol, but across consumer packaged goods. There's been a large movement towards that. And I think that any impending health scare is only going to facilitate more movement in that direction.
Another audience question here. What are you seeing in terms of adoption in conventional channels so far? Are buyers leaning in yet? I'll shoot that one to Bill.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for us, we've had more success in the East than our competitors out here in the West with regard to convention. But, you know, we got picked up by Harris Teeter and Publix. You know, I think it was 800-900 stores with Publix and all stores with Harris Teeter. And so Publix is normally in the non-alc space, one of the last retailers to actually pick up new, innovative, better for you products. And so I think that's a litmus test that conventional grocery is ready to bring in kombucha or hard kombucha. At least that's been my experience on the East Coast so far.
As you're in this expansion mode, Bridget, are you finding that conventional grocery is the answer, is looking this way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think about, like, you know, last year in Chicago at this time, there was no hard kombucha options, and there's and, you know, our Whole Foods, Fresh Time, a couple of our, you know, other larger chains, and now they have whole designated sections. I mean, I think some of the stores you walk into, it's just like, here's some better for you options at home. Yeah, and I think that is the trend. We've been, you know, a lot of market research. People are gravitating towards figuring out what to put into their bodies, and that makes them feel good. And I think it's important. People want to know what the calories, what the nutrients are, you know, what, you know, I think the better for you category is continuing to grow. And our retailers we've seen in each market we've gotten into within the first month, you know, we've seen a huge growth in all of our natural grocers and conventional grocery chains.
Greg, how big of a shift are you seeing from natural grocery to conventional grocery?
We started attacking that probably a little behind. I guess I'd mirror what Bill is saying. I mean, we're seeing a lot of success in the conventional grocery. And again, I think it goes kind of to our point where my point about the natural groceries being recession proof, that's not just about those venues, but it's about the folks that shop there. Those folks also shop. It's very common for a customer to go purchase something at that type of grocery store and then stop at 7-Eleven on their way home, or to go to Publix or to go to Kroger, whatever it is, and they want this product too, and they vote with their wallets. So, I mean, I think this speaks really loudly to the category. Todd, I'm sure this is true for you down in San Diego too, but 7-Elevens kick ass for us. And when I tell that to some people, they're like, oh, that's not a crunchy granola store. And it's like, well, this is a more mature product than a lot of people give it credit for.
Is 7-Eleven kicking ass for you, Todd?
We do pretty well in 7-Eleven. We just picked up 1,700 points of distribution across California with mandates in stores like Target, Safeway, Ralph's, places like that. So, you know, we made some pretty big wins with the spring resets, which weren't spring resets, and they're still just kind of trickling in. But, you know, we've seen a lot of buy-in from large chain buyers over just the last few months.
We've got about 2 minutes left to land this plane. I got a couple of audience questions here. What are each of your brands doing to protect or help establish a standard of identity for hard kombucha? Very quickly, Bill, jump in.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, I was, you know, working with Hannah over at KBI and GT on this project late last year before COVID came. And we really were focusing on, you know, the inputs, what makes it, the SCOBY, the tea, the sugar, whatever, the honey, the process, how is it made, and then finally the outputs. You know, what's the TA, what's the pH, what's the flavor profile, et cetera. And I think really trying to get unanimity around process, as I spoke to the other leading non-alcohol kombucha drinkers, was really where the challenge gets. I think we can all agree on what's required to make it. I think we can all agree on what it needs to be at the input, you know, live bacteria to be authentic. It needs to be, non-pasteurized, et cetera, et cetera. But the process in the middle of how we all make it is really where I don't know we should be focusing, nor do I think we'll get unanimity with the major brands. And certainly based on the way that KBI was trying to really frame up the process, I'm not sure that any of us would really be considered an authentic kombucha based on process. So
Bill's going to have to be the last word. I thank everybody here for tuning in. We're just short on time, but thank you for being here, and hit the main stage for more content.